Well, let's put that question to Dr. Richard Johnson, who's a lecturer in US politics and international relations at the University of Lancaster. Thank you very much for joining us, Richard. Do you think the North Koreans or South Koreans can trust the United States?
Well, I think that Donald Trump is in some ways mirroring the years of diplomacy that the North Koreans have used. So the North Koreans, both Kim Jong-un and his father Kim Jong-il, always played sort of hot and cold with the international community, always kept people guessing, and often they got what they wanted, particularly in terms of getting aid relief and sanctions lifted once they were placed on. And in some ways it feels like Donald Trump is doing the same thing, that sometimes he's hot, he's warm with them, other times he's cold, and he's leaving them guessing as well. It's very unconventional as an approach to diplomacy, but it is classic Donald Trump.
And do you think we should consider the possibility that it is a really clever strategy?
Well, the proof will be in the pudding. I mean, Trump certainly, one thing to think about is that in the last couple of weeks, Donald Trump has been thinking about the Iran nuclear deal, which he views as a very bad deal. He views it as a deal where the United States gave a lot and got very little. Trump loves to make deals. If you read The Art of the Deal, he loves to make deals on the cheap. And so, you know, if he looks at what he's accomplished in the last few weeks, just on the mere promise of a meeting, he's had the release of 3 US hostages, and the North yesterday demolishing their only known nuclear testing site. Now, so in some ways he can say, look, I've already won quite a lot without having to pay very little. But there's only so long that you can pursue this strategy before you possibly raise the stakes too high. And so that's the concern with this strategy. It hasn't been used before by US presidents with respect to North Korea, so we don't really know if it's going to be a wise strategy. But it is very different from what we've seen in recent times.
And Richard, if we take your point about what price will he pay for this deal, I guess the price the North Koreans want is the reconstruction of their economy, and that is potentially very expensive.
Well, that's maybe where China comes in, and I think that he's been doing a lot of work behind the scenes with China. It's been interesting how the tariff issue has intersected with this, and how the other week Trump was talking about saving Chinese firms from collapse, which were threatened as a result of sanctions which he'd placed, which one might think he's using as a way of putting pressure on the Chinese to be more proactive with the North Korean issue. And we saw that last year a bit with the sanctions at the United Nations, where President Trump got China to come on board with sanctions in a way in which they'd been reluctant to do in the past. I mean, one concern from the US foreign policy establishment is that one of the prices that President Trump would be willing to pay for a deal would be the removal of US troops from the Korean Peninsula, which has been off the table in the past, but President Trump has described as a waste of money and has countenanced it. And that would be something that Kim Jong-un would probably want.
Dr. Richard Johnson, thank you very much for joining us.